Tom, I've been watching some of the coverage today on the inquiry into what happened, the Emergencies Act in Ottawa. Some interesting folks, including Jim Watson, the mayor of Ottawa, testifying. What'd your takeaway from today? What'd you learn out there today?
I think that they're going to have to learn in Ontario that you can't have these police boards claiming that they have no authority whatsoever to deal with police operations. You can't have the second largest city in Ontario where they seem to believe that they don't have a word to say about police operations. They were left in the hands of a police chief who was completely overwhelmed. The information they were basing themselves on, we're learning, was completely defective. Not enough information about what the real intentions were. There was very bad communication, obviously, between CSIS and RCMP and the City of Ottawa Police. The fact that Peter Sloly was obliged to resign is enough indication that he wasn't up to the task, but he's not the only one. And I think that as this thing rolls out, we're going to find out that was one of the weakest links in this whole operation.
You know, I realize it's unfair now, tactically, strategically, because, as I say, hindsight is 20/20. It seems to me, as I'm listening to this, Tom, that the simplest solution to this, to be fair, and I realize it's a while ago, would have been to stop this, in essence, before it even started. Kind of what they did in Quebec City when they at least had this as a lesson as to how to deal with this.
And, you know, that the thing about Quebec City, of course, is that the Sûreté du Québec, as you correctly say, had the benefit of the information of what they had already gone through in Ottawa. But they were also incredibly clear. They said, we will not allow you to do this, this, and this. You're not coming to park your trucks on Grande Allée. They will be seized. They will be towed. Anything else you do that's against the law, you'll be arrested, period. And that's what was sorely lacking in Ottawa. Nobody seemed to know what was going on. It was very nice of them to send in that bureaucrat from the city to say, we didn't know. We thought it was going to be for the first weekend, and then it turns out that they were looking to reserve every hotel room in the city and stay for months, perhaps. Obviously, there was information that didn't make it through. The people who were in charge of police operations simply were not up to the task, period. This is going to help Trudeau, by the way, because what it's going to show is, with the information available, the people who were supposed to be making the decisions weren't making the right ones. And then when things were completely out of hand, the only tool left in the toolbox was the Emergencies Act. And I think this is going to help Trudeau's proof, his ability to establish the case, that he had no choice but to bring it in.
I just want to ask you real quickly before we move on. I heard Doug Ford today talking about the fact that someone asked the question why he wasn't there. I have the clip, and I just want you to react to that because this seems a bit odd to me. So Doug Ford today, again, asked why he was not asked to come to this. Brian?
But going back to my colleague Kevin Gallagher's question, how come, Premier Ford, you're not testifying at this inquiry? Were you asked? Did you decline?
I have not been asked. Again, I want to repeat what I said earlier. We have top officials from the OPP that were running the operation with conjunction with municipal police agencies and the RCMP. You know, our police did an incredible job. They were very peaceful. They moved forward. And I am so proud to stand here and back our police right across this country and right across this province. I'll always support our police. They're professional, they're polite, and they ended up getting the job done. Thank you.
What's going on here, Tom?
Well, what was interesting, in that whole exchange that he had with journalists, there was an announcement near Ottawa at Canada by Nicoya, the large cell phone company was bringing in a very major investment, and Trudeau was there along with the president of that company, whose name I couldn't pronounce, and he was with Doug Ford. And Doug Ford was fulsome in his praise of Justin Trudeau. He said, look, every step of the way, the Prime Minister had my support. And that was a very interesting bit of support, of course, to hear from the Premier of Ontario, who's a Conservative, which is, the fishing pond that Pierre Poilievre is hoping to get a bunch of fish in and then next time out. And he was really standing absolutely foursquare with Justin Trudeau on this one.
He's just trying to stay out of it.
It sure seems that way, yeah.
Well, I think it was a bit more than that because he hearkened back, and, it's so easy for him. It would have been super easy for him to start finessing his answers, right? And putting a little bit of distance, with the information that we had at the time, that sort of thing. But he stood with Trudeau completely. He gave the example. He said, look, just one of those bridges, the bridge in Windsor, was holding back $1 billion a day in business for people in Ontario. He says, I was getting phone calls from governors of the states And he said it made no sense, and the Prime Minister had my support then, and he has it now. So I found that very dignified. I've seen more than once in my career a politician saying, the temperature of the water's changed. I'm going to change how I react to it. But I thought Ford was very honorable today when he stood there with Trudeau.
I don't know. It just seemed weird to me. The Prime Minister gets to testify, but the Premier of Ontario, where this happened, doesn't? I don't know.
Well, he doesn't. If he wanted to testify, of course he could have. But he's got his police service people in. That's what he was saying.
Yeah.
And they could have, of course, called him in as a witness. And of course, in that case, if he had been, summoned to appear, he would have done it. I'm sure without hesitation. But he doesn't have that much to say about this thing. It's not his decision. Oh, by the way, there was one thing missing from his list of police there, because anytime you go back to the films of that day, you will see very clearly the Sûreté du Québec there in very large number, full riot gear. They were not wearing any identification, but all you have to do is know the color of the SQ to know that was the SQ's riot police. They're in very large numbers because they were part of this operation. When they say everything that they had was thrown at this thing to bring an end to it, everything that they could bring in, including the Sûreté du Québec.
So just quickly before we move on, but if you're saying that Trudeau is going to come out looking great in all of this, isn't that why Ford is, he's just smart. He's just being a smart politician, and he's like, oh, that guy did the right thing, I'm going to go with that guy, and people are going to be praising him, then I'll get the praise by default.
The people on the right, a lot of the people who support Poilievre, no matter what comes out of the commissioner's report, they're going to try to personalize it. They're going to say, this is a judge who was named by, Jean Chrétien at the time. This is a judge who once worked for John Turner, which is, by the way, all that stuff is true. This guy's, been involved, an Ottawa fellow. He's been around for years and years and highly respected, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to attack him. The same way, Natasha, they attacked the two women who testified on Friday saying, some of them are close to the more progressive elements at City Hall.
Oh, geez,
therefore, we can discount a lot of what they're saying. This is the world that we live in today. You can attack everybody on anything. So what I found interesting is this is Ford's base. A lot of those votes are votes that Poilievre is after. Poilievre has been mollycoddling and supporting the truckers and the Freedom Convoy and that since the beginning. He says now that he backed away from it later on, but let's be clear. He brought them coffee and donuts to encourage them. And so I think that it is a rare display of simple, it's not strategy anymore. It's just integrity. Ford standing there saying, I agree with this. By the way, there will be parts of this report that will be rough on the federal government, saying that they didn't do enough early enough. But by putting the emphasis early on the city of Ottawa and its many, many, many deficiencies, it'll take some of the heat off the feds.
So while we're talking about Pierre Poilievre, why don't we talk about this tactic that he's taking to go after Liberal turf? Kind of an interesting approach with visible minorities. Tell us more.
Yeah, and he's got several members of different visible minorities in his caucus, and he's been giving them pretty important roles as he's put together his shadow cabinet. Now, of course, everybody's got a little bit of a role in his shadow cabinet. It's frankly a technique that I also use because you want to make sure that people feel that they're part of a team and that they're all doing something. So he's used whatever talents he could find in his caucus. He's got a really large number of people who will be standing up and asking questions. And he's done a very smart thing because he knows, if you look at Andrew Scheer's numbers, if you look at Aaron O'Toole's numbers, they were never really able to break through in the Greater Toronto area. That's 50. That's 50 seats that you have to get a big chunk of if you ever want to form a government. And you can't get a big chunk of them unless you've got cultural communities and minorities who believe that you're on their side and that you have something to say to them, which neither Scheer nor O'Toole was able to accomplish. And if Poilievre can start working with them early on and show interest and start connecting with them, then he might just win a bunch of those seats.
Last question, Tom, before we move on. Last topic, rather. I asked this earlier on for our question of the day. Those 44 federal civil servants, the ones working for Service Canada, ended up stealing the CERB money. The question I asked was, should they be fired? Would it not have been okay just to simply either suspend them or reprimand them somehow? And I will tell you that 99% of the people who weighed in not only thought they were right to be fired, but would like to see them in jail.
Well, they've been fired, and that's a really good thing, and it is the minimum. And I do think that there should be prosecutions for these things. Let the courts decide. We've talked about this during the pandemic. We've talked about it any number of times. The fact that if you look at it objectively, it's probably the best part of the pandemic response from the federal government. Trudeau got it absolutely right. You don't start throwing red tape at this thing. You start giving checks to families who have lost their jobs so they could put food on the table, full stop. But now that the thing's over, yes, you've got to dig down a little bit. And if you find out that 44 of your employees who were getting paid to do jobs somehow contrived to apply to get $500 a week, that they knew that of all the people in Canada, everybody's going to have an excuse when they get in front of a judge. Oh, I thought I met the criteria. But you can't exactly argue that when you work in the government, and the whole thing is about giving money to people who have lost their jobs. So there's no excuse for them, and I really do hope, to use that old expression, that they throw the book at them.
Well, we shall see. And I know you said when we've talked about this before, people who look at this and hear these numbers and think, oh, my God, I can't believe this happens. But every time there is a government program, Tom, what is it again, 2%? You figure we'll go to fraud?
They have to factor in that there will be fraud. And here maybe they were being a little bit more elastic because the priority was to take care of families. But now when there are cases like this, I just hope that they have enough resources to throw some effort at this to go after some of the scoundrels, because that's what you have to make sure that you give a lesson for the next time that there's a government program, that people understand that, it's not because it costs a lot more to prosecute than the $500. You still have to go after them.
Tom Mulcair, back tomorrow morning with Andrew Carter at 7:40. Thank you, Tom.